Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's RD2RD Live Show. My name is Megan Boitano, the founder of RD2RD Marketplace. And today we are talking about diabetes education goes virtual. And really the idea of teaching over telehealth and contrasting that with the in-person methodologies that we might be more familiar with and some best practices that have emerged as we've kind of moved through the pandemic and really started to deliver more of our care virtually. And today we have Lorena Drago here with us, and she is a diabetes education specialist and has really come up with some innovative tools for teaching in the virtual environment. And today we're going to let her talk a little bit about what she's learned, kind of the lived experience of teaching through this, and then how she took that and translated it into tools that are better designed for use in the virtual world. So Lorena, thank you for being here today.
It is wonderful, wonderful to be here, Megan. I am a fan of RD2RD Marketplace since its inception 4 years ago. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really wild to have like 4 years of time under my belt with this marketplace. A lot of incremental improvement, which I know really, is something that makes sense for the topic we're talking about today of incremental improvement and taking what you know and applying it. So I want to start out by learning a little bit about you. Obviously, I follow you on social media. I see you speaking about a lot of different topics, obviously diabetes education, but also cultural and Hispanic food practices, which is definitely something that I love that you're giving a voice to. But tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, the work that you do as a dietitian and diabetes specialist.
Yes. So I help persons with diabetes manage their condition, and I try to do it with practical information. I think that that's exactly what people need. They need knowledge, but I think what they need the most is what to do when I get home. And at the same time, I am also an author. I'm an author of 3 books. The first one is Beyond Rice and Beans, and that is both in English and in Spanish. The Caribbean Guide to Eating Healthy with Diabetes. And then the second book, I am a co-editor and author of Cultural Food Practices. And then the third book is the 15-minute consultation, tips, tools, and activities to make your nutrition consultation active and also practical. So everything is about practical. Mm-hmm. And then I also, as you mentioned before, I help health professionals, dietitians, and diabetes care and education specialists counsel their Hispanic patients with confidence. And that's the part that you saw yesterday. I am in the midst of a 6-week series of breaking the cultural code to help health professionals counsel their Hispanic patients.
That was a huge undertaking, so congratulations yesterday for getting a big event done. So, yeah. Now, one of the things that, dietitians often have a lot of credentials behind our name, and you're obviously a lot of the books that you've authored have, right, that diabetes and also that counseling and practical element. How did you really get passionate about diabetes education? And then tell us about the special certification that you have, because it wasn't one I was familiar with until, I I saw it a couple of times and I decided to look it up. So tell me a little bit more about your background as far as diabetes teaching and
Yes. So I that was not going to be my path. I think that for many of us, we start one way and then we end up where we end up by default. So I really wanted to move into the oncology nutrition arena. That was really my passion, but it didn't go that way. So I ended up working in the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children, in the South Bronx in New York, where I first came. I am Colombian. And when I came here, I started studying nutrition. I spoke English. I went to a bilingual American school all my life while I was in Colombia. So I spoke English. So as soon as I came to the States to study in college, I wanted to be a doctor. And then I took a nutrition class. And again, that shifted my career. And but what happened was that most of the population that we served was from Puerto Rico. And one thing that they had in common was that many of them had diabetes. And I became very interested in diabetes. And one day I met a nurse and she said to me, I'm a diabetes educator. And I said, tell me a little bit more about that. And at the time, the credential was CDE, Certified Diabetes Educator. Then I met another dietitian who was a WIC dietitian. And she said to me, oh, it is great. You should learn more about that. And I said, tell me more. And I said, you know what? I want to become a certified diabetes educator. So I started logging in my hours. At the time, I started seeing more and more patients. I started working more with diabetes, and I realized that there was very little information about Hispanics and diabetes in terms of cultural information.
yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh, I have to start creating all these teaching tools about diabetes and cultural information about diabetes, because whatever there was available was about Mexicans. It was not about Caribbean Hispanics. So that was the genesis of the book, which was mostly about Caribbean Hispanics and diabetes. So eventually, that's when I became a certified diabetes educator. And Megan, that was the best career decision that I ever made. I wish I would have done it sooner. Now the credential changed
That was the thing.
3 years ago.
Didn't know
And
that it became CDCES from
right.
CDE.
So now we are certified diabetes care and education specialists.
Got it.
So this, for those of you that are listening to this, if you want to specialize in diabetes education, you just have to go to CBDCE, which is the certification board for certified diabetes care and education specialists. It's still taking me a little longer to say it because it's still a little bit new. I still want to default back to the old name, kind of what happened to us when we switched to the academy, and it was taking us a little longer to say it.
It definitely was. That's actually, I find it interesting that kind of your background, your experience really shaped kind of where you are today. And I imagine that as the pandemic kind of hit and we went from, doing education in person to virtual, what was that experience like for you? Kind of give us a window into how that happened, and then maybe fast forward to what it looks like today.
Yes. So pre-pandemic, and again, so my career evolved. So pre-pandemic, I was working at another hospital, and by then I was a hospital administrator. So I was completely doing just hospital administrative duties. I was overseeing multiple departments, including surgery, ambulatory surgery. However, I am still a clinician at heart. So I still, outside my job, I still rented an office so that I could see my patients with diabetes. And at the same time, I carved some time at the hospital and I was seeing patients with diabetes in a group setting. So I was seeing groups in English and I was seeing groups in Spanish. And in a doctor's office, I was seeing patients, again, English and Spanish, one-on-one. So that's how I kept that clinical desire, that connection, that I so desire, plus the hours that I also needed to keep. So diabetes education is something that completely fascinates me because it's so multidisciplinary. So I have colleagues that are nurse practitioners, registered nurses, they are psychologists, and they are also exercise physiologists. And the discussions, they are not just about nutrition. We discuss medication, we discussed insulin, injectables, we talk about monitoring, glucometers, CGMs, which are continuous glucose monitoring, prevention of acute and chronic complications, physical activity, behavioral health, etc. So I had my handouts that were already printed. I had my PowerPoints ready for my group sessions. I had everything. So that was pretty much it. I was working all the time because being a hospital administrator, you are on pretty much all the time. And I also had my patients. So that was my life pre-pandemic.
Nice. And then when the pandemic hit and you went to kind of needing to see the vast majority of your groups and your individuals virtually, what was that experience, like? What was working and what wasn't working?
So then at that time, this was already planned that I was going to leave my hospital administrator job. It was already planned, even before the pandemic. It just happened to be in March. So my plan was to move virtually and just work with Hispanic Foodways, which is the name of my company. So, but I was going to open up an office and just work on my company, just doing writing and seeing patients. That was the goal. So now pandemic comes and now I am forced to go virtual. So I had to completely adjust and adjust very quickly, but in a way I was already planning to do this. So one big difference is when we are in an office, and I have some tools here, is we have tools, right? Most of us dietitians, we are very familiar with our measuring cups, right? We also have things like our plates, and we have things such as handouts. So all these nice little tools we have in our office. If we are diabetes educators, we may have glucometers, and we may have insulin, things that we teach. Well, when we are now doing this in front of a computer, and sometimes when we have patients that may not even have a computer, they may only use a phone, it's a little difficult to tell a patient, excuse me, can you see this? Can you see this? And you're showing this, And now all these beautiful handouts that you may have or lists, they can't see them when you have that handout in front of you. So now those handouts do no longer work. If you're using a cup, yes, they can see, and I have my cups, and my cups have items that are written on the cup. So now I just cannot just show this because they cannot read it. So now I have to think, how am I going to create this when they are using their phone? Now I have to start thinking in terms of visuals. And I need to start thinking, how am I going to recreate these handouts in a way that makes sense visually? So that's when I have to start thinking about repurposing, recreating. And there's still some things that may work. Something like this, for example, may still work. So now some things may work, but something like this little cute little things here are not going to work because they're too tiny. So that is not going to work. So then I have to do an inventory and say, what are some of the things that I need to repurpose? And some of the things that I have been meaning to, maybe one day when I have time, I need to redo it. Well, maybe now is the time. And then now is the time. Then I started working with another company that reached out to me and said, Lorena, we need you to start working with this population that had restricted literacy, health literacy. And I just want to inject that 80 million people, that's about 25% of Americans, have restricted or poor literacy. And that includes numeracy, which is the ability to use numbers. And there's a lot of numbers and the use of numbers in diabetes education, including in nutrition education. When we tell people to read the food label, we are asking them to use arithmetic. And we may think that, well, most people do know how to use that, but the answer is no, they don't. And most of us brag that we are not good in math. We are not even ashamed to say it because we use calculators all the time. So most people are okay saying, oh my God, I'm terrible in math. And we can even use our fingers because it's okay. But it's not so okay when someone is calculating how many carbs they need for the amount of insulin that they're going to inject. That may cause someone to have a hypoglycemic episode. So it's not that funny when we do that. So those are the things that I started to think about. It is very important to transmit this information and to do it in a way that it's accurate.
Going back to the comment you made about, some teaching tools don't work and the need to transition some of your topics to the virtual world. How did you go about, deciding, okay, so I need to now teach in a virtual environment, and kind of fast forwarding to today where we might have a bit of, a hybrid model where we might be teaching some information virtually, some information, in person, if that's the case for you. How did you go about deciding, how do I need to structure my teaching if some people are on a phone and some people are maybe in front of a computer? How do you tackle that?
Right. So then this is what I did. I figured, if I can ask questions with the tool, then that meant that I would be able to use the tool if I was able to ask the right questions. There would definitely would be some limitations if I was only able to use the phone. But at least I would be able to ask the question. So for example, when I only had the phone available, and that sometimes happened, I would ask the question, what was your blood glucose? For example, what was your blood glucose yesterday? If the blood glucose yesterday at 7 a.m. was 70, which was low, I would say, what did you do? And then the person would provide me with the answer. So then I would copy the answer. Then the next question would be, um, what are some of the recommendations that your doctor gave you? And then I would give them a multiple choice question. That would be exactly what the teaching tool would have, but without the pictures. But I would be providing them with A, B, or C. And then they would give me the answer. Which one? Then I would ask, why did you select that answer? So everything that the tools would have, I would just provide them the question and I provide them with the answer. And I would give them what the visual was. So if the three choices were a cucumber, an apple, and a pork chop, I would tell them what the three visuals were, and I would read them the question. And then they would have to give me the answer. That's how I would do them. And then if it was a matter of the size of, let's say, I would tell them, make a fist with your hand. And I would say, that's the size of the amount of rice. And then I would say, cup your hand. That's the second size. And then I would say, and then I want you to just make a circle and just put your thumb and then your index finger. That would be the third amount of rice. And then I would give them the three answers. So this way, that would be how I would pose that question just with the phone. If they had the ability to use the link and they were using the phone and they were able to actually see that tool, then everything would be fine. But everything had to be extremely simple because I always ran the risk that the patient did not have access to a camera. And sometimes that happened when the person was elderly and they did not know how to use technology. So that's why some of the tools had to be very, very simple.
Yeah.
And they had to be adapted in that manner.
I think that, one of the things that stands out there is just the level of, I guess, small bits and really bringing it into a very specific and visual example, whether you're using a camera or you're using, a handout, I think, or you're using an online teaching tool. One of the things you said that kind of stands out is this idea of being practical. And you've also shared the importance of, as we prepped for this, doing an assessment to understand what our patient needs to know, because diabetes education, there is so much that needs to be delivered. And I think sometimes we feel a sense of accomplishment when we go, well, I checked all the boxes. I went over, and off they went, and I got through my list. So can you talk about how you incorporate kind of that assessment of knowledge into your virtual session so that you can be more effective?
Yes. So one thing to always remember, Megan, thank you for bringing this up, is that for most of us, we are teaching adults. And to remember is that adults we are not a blanket state, right? So most of us already have some sort of knowledge. So and limited amount of time to teach. So one thing that I incorporate is what I have coined as a patient assessment tool. And that means before you start teaching, I want to know what the patient already knows. And that does two things. It allows me to know what the patient knows and where I need to bridge that gap, and also find out what the patient needs to focus on. So I have a tool that it only takes less than two to 3 minutes to do. So I later on I will share. It's just it could be done with any topic. In this case, it's just diabetes, and I focus it on carbohydrates because I try to focus my first assessment on carbohydrate, simply because the majority of the macronutrients that we eat is usually carbohydrate. I do focus on protein, on fats, but carbs probably I focus on the first time. And that's why it's so important.
Yeah. And I think that idea of figuring out what needs to be covered, right? And then looking at how do I make that interactive and how do I judge during the session that what I'm teaching is understood? So I'm wondering if that change from in person to virtual, does that look different? What does that element look like?
Yes. So in person, because I love props, and I also have a lot of the food models. I have tons of food models, Megan. My husband makes fun of me because I also have cultural food models. I have them from Mexico, from Colombia, and I collect them from Central and South America. So I usually use the food models, and I cannot do that virtually. So what I have done is I have created a patient assessment tool virtually with pictures, which has really expanded, and it has made it into a less clutter-free environment. Let's put it that way. So my husband is very happy because I don't have this huge box with food models anymore. I can just now can do it with any kind of food from anywhere in the world.
And I think you've been referencing, I'm hopeful that I tried to add a different scene to my broadcasting software that in theory will show people, you've been referencing your, diabetes teaching tools, and some of, I think, the assessment tool that you mentioned, as well as, a very pictorial approach to kind of how to teach. And especially, like you said, we're mostly teaching adults, mostly teaching, and a lot of them some will have access to a computer. So thinking about how do you present the information on the screen and teach and follow along and have that built in, I guess, post teaching knowledge. So making sure there's a link, but that if you want, I kind of gave people just a little peek at your visual tool that you have.
Yeah, I think it's because what I also want to share, and this part is really scientific, is that visuals in general are so important. And I know that many of the handouts that we use will have some visuals, but I just have to say that visuals have been shown to be 43% more persuasive than presentations without visuals. And we remember messages that have visuals much better. than if we just heard it or read it. And they also reduce the time that a patient spends reading. And I just want to say that look how we use emojis. That alone should tell you how, whether we have low or high literacy, constantly. I just purchased a phone 3 weeks ago, and every time I'm texting someone, there is an emoji that pops up for anything. I just said book, all of a sudden there is an emoji popping up with books. So we love visuals. So every time that I think about teaching, I always think, what am I going to say? What am I going to show? And what am I going to do? So that I can meet the learner's need, which is the auditory, the visual, and the kinesthetic.
Can you give an example maybe that kind of demonstrates that specific element, around a common topic that you might teach, and compare it to maybe how somebody else might do it and your approach, perhaps?
This doesn't have anything to do with diabetes, but it's one thing that I just came to mind because I'm doing a presentation tonight, and I am thinking about it since I practiced yesterday, and it just came to mind. When we are telling women how to practice a self-breast exam, right? So let's say that we are showing someone that has never done it, and we need to teach it. So the first thing that we need to say is the importance of practicing self-breast exam. And that is because we need to be aware of how our breasts feel. And if we detect something that is different, we need to contact our physician and let them know to prevent breast cancer. So now we need to teach. And so now I just said it. So this is the auditory part. Then now this is the visual part, is I am showing you with my 2 fingers, and I'm showing you this. And now I need to teach you. So now I need to teach you with something, and I want to show you, but I want to show you with something that you probably have some kind of reference as an adult that you already know. So think about mowing the lawn. Either you have done it or you have seen someone do it. So I say to you, look at your areola, look at your 2 fingers, and you're going to start doing a motion around your areola, going in that circular motion around the areola as if you were mowing the lawn, and you're not going to lift your fingers, and you're going to circle it until you reach under your arm. And you're going to start, and you're going to continue in a circular motion, and you're not going to leave any surface around your breast untouched until you reach the under your armpit. And that's how you're going to do it.
I think that was really important. I think of making sure that what we're referencing has some connection, that people would understand a new concept to something that is familiar and can kind of helps bring the new information very practical again, kind of that what you said before.
Exactly. So by showing a picture of mowing the lawn, showing a picture of the breast, showing the two fingers. So I am telling you, I am showing you the visual, I am connecting it with something that you either know or you have seen before. That will be the key. Another one will be, for example, the traffic light. So if I want to connect with something, let's say, of having something frequently,
Right.
so, or a lot, that's why we use the traffic light. So that, again, that's something that you can show, something that you can say, and something that you can do. So utilizing this say, show, and do, it's a good way to introduce a topic. And then you want to reinforce that information. And by reinforcing, you have to then ask questions. You have to provide examples. And you have to provide that interaction. Because when you provide that interaction with the teaching tool, it is how you are going to help that patient move that information from the short-term memory into the long-term memory. So there has to be association, and it has to be interaction. And of course, then there is the teach back, which the teach back is either show me or tell me, how are you going to do this? And examples of how are they going to do it later on? How are they going to do this tomorrow? Tell me how you're going to do it. Show me how you're going to do it.
Do you find that that is fairly similar when you do it virtually versus in-person sessions? Anything that you've changed?
Yeah. Sometimes it is harder because, for example, when I was teaching how to use a continuous glucose monitoring, that was challenging, I have to say, because I am not there. So when someone is stuck, I can't reach out and say, no, 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 don't do it there. No, don't. That part is challenging. So when it's one-on-one, of course, it is easier. And there are other things that I can share a video with someone by just sending them a link. And when it's a video, then the person can actually stop the video, and I can say, well, can you do that? If it's a video, and then they can stop and they can do it. But there is nothing like that actual interaction and having me doing something when someone gets stuck. But that is when there is the CGM, that part is more challenging. When there are things regarding nutrition, for example, then that is less challenging. Then that in the virtual world, I would say is very comparable.
Okay. So let's say, if dietitians are looking at kind of evaluating their own teaching tools and repurposing them, one of the simple things I know, maybe it seems simple to me, is the orientation simply of the resources that you're teaching. Our handouts tend to be like 8.5 by 11-inch portrait paper, right? And when you're moving into, a desktop or computer, if you're doing the majority on a computer screen, the resources that you created, really using the real estate of the screen so that you have even just the layout being more, I guess, friendly for virtual sessions. What are some other things as people think about taking, well, I have this handout, maybe it has some great visuals. How do I take that into a, virtual session?
if you have a handout already and it has great visuals, one thing that I would do would be probably, if you love that visual, take a good picture and then transfer that picture into into a handout, if that's feasible. If you love to use it, and then just add the words. What I would do is not add a lot of words,
Yeah.
because then that takes everything away. Just try to use the visual and then whatever message you're going to convey, the key message, and then that's it.
Yeah. I like that you've, really gone over the idea of the doing part of learning, that it isn't going over the written word or even looking at the visual, that really learning, and especially for adults, really comes into that do part of show me what you learned, and then, evaluating that, whether that you mentioned teach back, other ways of having them apply what they've learned, and making sure you're spending the time teaching things that need to be taught. So having that assessment tool, spending that 2 to 5 minutes really understanding where are the knowledge gaps, so I can spend this time really making an impact so that we walk away. Maybe they didn't learn everything, but they've moved forward in a concept that's really important. So I think you said a lot of valuable things.
Yeah, I think, Megan, one of the things that it has taken me a long time to learn is that we need to start thinking that we are helping patients improve or solve a condition or a problem that they're having. They are not studying their condition. They are improving their problem. I think because we study a condition, like we studied diabetes, I studied diabetes, but they are not studying their diabetes. We are helping them with their diabetes. We are helping them manage their glucose. We are helping them prevent hypoglycemia. Um, but they don't need to know everything about their pancreas, right? So,
Yeah.
but I know that that's how, including Lorena, because many times I go that route. And I'm thinking, no, stop, stop. They don't need to know that. They need to know the practical things. So the practical things about things. So I'm going to say it again, including for my own purpose. We need to help patients improve or solve their conditions or the problems that they're having about their conditions.
Oh, that is excellent. Lorena, I feel that you've really demonstrated just the amount of passion you have for teaching and kind of the value of really the practical aspects of, diving into teaching diabetes is no easy task, right? But having lived through the experience of moving a lot of it virtually, taking what you've learned and creating both, blog content, nutrition resources, it's really inspiring to see. So I want to make sure that if people want to connect with you, learn more about the resources that you have, your website is linked in the notes here, as well as your store to RD2RD, and also if you have, any other content, feel free to share. Or places you want people to go.
If they want to learn more about the program Breaking the Cultural Code, they can go to lorenadrago.com /cultural-code, and they can take a look at that, or they can reach me at lorena@diabetesontheweb.com.
Awesome. Lorena, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Megan.
I really think the work that you do is important, and the way that you share information is just so refreshing, and I am glad that RD2RD brought our paths together.
I know. Thank you. I'm such a fan.
Yeah,
Such a fan.
yeah. Yay. Well, everyone, thanks for joining today, and we will be back for the last RD2RD live show of the year with someone many of you may know, Chrissy Carroll, expert blogger, and we're going to be talking about making money online, opportunities for dietitians. So she is a wealth of knowledge, so I look forward to chatting with her. Again, Lorena, have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks for being on here today.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.